is whether or not you should buy a used bike or a new bike. This bike in front of you is a 2001 ZX12R. It's a very rare bike, but it's also about 20 years old. I don't particularly have a new bike, but I do have a newer bike. This is a 2006 GSXR 1000. And I'm just gonna talk about some of the pros and cons of purchasing a used bike versus purchasing a new or newer bike. This bike is 20 years old, but it's still one of the fastest production bikes ever built, this ZX12. There's been a lot of work done to it by the previous owner that I personally know and work with. So just looking at it, there's a few things that are wrong with it that I have to get fixed. But all in all, it's in very good position and very good condition. This bike, on the other hand, pretty much nothing was wrong with it when I purchased it, except the clutches were burnt out. And that's pretty much the dealer just giving me a crappy deal. I actually bought it out of town, so I didn't even know the clutches were burnt up when I bought it. And the tachometer was malfunctioning, giving me a fuel injection code. But on this bike, it already came stretched and lowered. And that's one pro to buying used bikes, is that you can find one that has modifications that you like already done to it. But typically a newer bike or a new bike isn't gonna have many modifications. On this bike, I actually had to stretch it myself. And the parts and the labor were about $2,000, about $1,000 for parts and about $1,000 for labor. I actually overpaid a lot because I went to Ride Now to get this extended swing arm put on. But that's one big thing about buying a newer bike, is that it may not have the modifications that you want. On this particular bike, it already came with the Yoshimura exhaust. And a lot of other things like this GPR stabilizer and these frame sliders, which are all very good modifications overall. This bike, it already had the Muzzy exhaust. Obviously both of these bikes are used, so I mean, a lot of used bikes already have modifications done, and that can be a pro and a con, because you don't necessarily know who did the work or how the work was done. So you're kind of like shooting in the dark whether or not it was done correctly, and you have to just figure it out as you ride the bike and figure out what's wrong with it and things of that nature that you wouldn't necessarily have to do with a newer bike or a new bike. And obviously another pro about buying a used bike is the fact of the price. This bike right here in front of me, I only paid $3,500 for it. It has a new engine. It has a lot of work done to it. So the previous owner probably put at least 8 to 10 grand into it. And I got it for a steal. That's why I actually ended up buying it. This newer bike, on the other hand, I paid about $5,500 for, which wasn't a bad price. Having a newer bike or a new bike is probably not gonna cause you as many headaches, because you're not gonna have as much wear and tear on the bike in and of itself. A used bike you're probably gonna have to spend some money. I'm just gonna be honest with you. You're gonna tend to have to spend some money. Thinking about purchasing a bike, there's gonna be a large, gap in the idea. Do I want a bone stock new bike that I know probably has no problems with it, but I have to, spend $2,000 on a stretch, probably another $1,000, $1,500 on the exhaust, probably another $200-300 on a stabilizer, probably $100 on the frame sliders. Probably, this clutch isn't stock. It actually has a Brock's clutch mod, which is like $250. So, or is it going to be more beneficial for you to try to seek out a bike that's been used and may have some extra problems, but already is stretched, or already has an exhaust, or already has a power commander, or already is tuned. It's kind of a gamble when you buy a used bike because you're not gonna know what's done to it. Like for instance, this bike doesn't have an air shifter on it yet, but I already have, you know, the air shifter tank built into my swing arm, and I already have a Power Commander 3. So all I would have to do is basically get the multifunction hub and, you know, get my mechanic to hook up an air shifter, which doesn't really cost that much money. That's probably what I'm gonna do next. Versus like a bike like this, it has an air shifter. The tank's in the tail with the MPS kill box, but the previous owner actually, he didn't need the kill box. He has a Power Commander 5 on this bike, so he could have just used the Power Commander 5 to kill the ignition to work the air shifter. So I'm gonna have to get rid of the MPS kill box so that I can run an ignition timing module, because when you're running a Power Commander 5 with an ignition timing module, which is an add-on for it, you're not gonna be able to actually use the MPS kill box. So I gotta, you know, get my mechanic to go in here and rewire this whole thing and make it a little bit more suited for my needs, because I like high tuning capability, especially because this is a slip-on. This is a slip-on Muzzy exhaust, but I plan on, you know, actually purchasing the headers to give this a little bit more power. This also has a ported head on it, so I'm gonna need that ignition timing module. So that's little things to consider when you're purchasing a used bike. It might not, like, it might have cool modifications, but it might not necessarily be done the way you want it to be done. I think the main thing to consider is whether or not you want to just start with like a bike like this that didn't really have too many mods done to it. It had the GPR stabilizer, the frame sliders, a Power Commander 3, and a full exhaust. That's pretty much all the mods that it already came with. But my Power Commander was actually tuned terribly when I got it. And then when I took it to my tuner, he put a crazy tune on it. This bike is a lot faster than what it was. But that's one thing to consider. That's the main thing to consider. Do you want to buy a bike that's already modded out, has a lot of money put into it, but you don't necessarily know exactly what's done to it, or if it's going to be the way you want the bike to be set up? Do you want to start with a brand new bike and just, you know, build it from scratch? Or do you want to come over here and have a bike that's already heavily modified, that has a lot of things done to it, but it might not necessarily be done to your specifications or the way you want the bike to be set up? I think it's just food for thought, and, you know, I'll let you guys determine. Would you rather have a newer bike or a new bike? Or would you rather have a bike that's heavily modified, that's super fast, but may not be exactly the way you want it to be, and you will have to build off of what somebody else started to create? Let me know down in the comments. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.